And welcome back, everybody. Episode 32, we have Amita Soni. She has spanned a long career as a chief marketing officer, CEO now, investor, board member across various industries. And today we're going to talk about digital health, something she knows a lot about. So make sure to get your pad of notes out. Amita, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you've come to understand digital health as it is today and how you're looking at it moving forward.
Sure. I have a strong track record of driving expansion, breakthrough expansion in private equity-backed companies, as well as large multinationals in several tech sectors, SaaS, AI, digital health, or cybersecurity. I've held various roles, as you mentioned, including founder, CEO, CMO, investor, board director, advisor. And in these positions, I've helped drive a lot of new products in markets, facilitating funding and IPOs and generating billions of dollars for stakeholders. Throughout my career, though, I have addressed various aspects of healthcare. And as technology and healthcare began to converge over the last few years, I became intrigued by the potential to improve people's health at scale and became a passionate advocate. Over the years, I've worked with a broad range of digital health companies, including Platform Q Health, Moving Analytics, Compatis, Bittrex, different aspects of healthcare. As we all know, healthcare, there's not one single thing, there are multiple things around it. And I've been lucky enough to have broad exposure there. So the next part of your question was the urgency and importance of digital health transformation with AI. And what we're seeing with AI, certainly in other sectors outside of healthcare, but in healthcare as well, it allowing for the analysis of vast amounts of data, which allows for better decision making, whether it makes healthcare more accessible, improves patient outcomes, helps reduce the healthcare costs. These are our challenges in healthcare, the cost aspect of it, and making sure that the patient outcomes are better. So we're seeing that it's doing it with things like medical imaging, diagnostics, and also predictive analytics to improve the thing. There's also more of the personalized and precision medicine as such that we are seeing across different, we're seeing that for cancer now and other conditions as well. And then there's the other aspect of AI, which it is automating a lot of the admin tasks per se, and freeing up times for clinicians and others to focus on more critical aspects of healthcare.
And how, for the listeners, background, global tech founders, investors, but there's a lot of people who want to understand how it's going to impact their lives. Talk about some of the biggest impacts we're going to see in digital health from the perhaps preventative to everyday care and making sure you're healthy, all the way to intervention with chronic cases or catastrophic cases.
Yeah, we've seen several things over the last few years how digital health has evolved. For example, telemedicine accelerated by the COVID pandemic as such, but telemedicine has made remote consultations, the diagnosis and treatment mainstream now. It's also aligned for people in underserved or rural areas to have easy access to healthcare, but also in maybe more urban settings, it's a convenience aspect of things as well. So it's both, and it's here to stay, and it's like grow, I think.
And what are the drivers, the fundamentals that is really making this change possible? Is it differences in our ability to collect this data, to interpret this data, or to make decisions on that data, or is it the whole gamut?
So telemedicine was one aspect of it. There are others which I'll get into in just a minute. It's also a question of, or the reimbursement aspect of it is also key in terms of what happened during the pandemic. And then there was some retrenchment, but there's a very vocal aspect of it from patients saying that we want the telemedicine to stay as such. Yeah. But there are other things we are seeing as well, which could be, these are like wearable devices. We have seen that explosion of wearable devices from a fitness perspective, but more and more over the years, we're going to see that now addressing more sophisticated health metrics and providing more real-time data to address chronic and more serious conditions per se. We're also having the mobile app, whether it is things like Calm or My Sugar or Flare Down, Chemo Wave, which are going beyond fitness as well, and everything from mental health support to chronic disease management, such. And then, of course, you have things like digital therapeutics with things like, say, for example, Propeller Health's asthma platform for treating, helping treat and manage asthma in this case, but there are other conditions as well.
What's your take on AI counselors?
I mean, air counselors for mental health.
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, mental health is becoming more and more of a challenge. And maybe it was made worse during the pandemic, where so many people were isolated as such. But it's also made worse by the fact that it is not easy to get access to a mental health provider, whether a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am here in the Boston area, and there is a huge wait to find a mental health provider. There are also issues in terms of what is reimbursed or not as such. From that perspective, anything which can help with giving people some access. And I think we have to recognize that there are different levels of mental health. There's things like anxiety and depression. And they're more serious conditions. Perhaps with use of AI, if it can help with some of the more the anxiety and depression type of conditions and leave more serious conditions for the physician or clinicians to address, that might be something to consider. I think it's important to get people some help. I've been involved with another young company which was doing this not necessarily purely from an AI basis, but also the peer group thing. So I think people are finding different ways to address this challenge to get people the mental health support that they need.
And what are the biggest changes that the general everyday person, the everyday American is going to see in their near term experience? So let's say an everyday American is going to the doctor for their checkups once or twice a year. They maybe go to the hospital once a year for who knows what, any manner of things. They're always using likely apps. They're going to the gym or they're not. In their life, what is something that will become, you mentioned telemedicine, definitely a great example, but is there anything else that's on the forefront that not a lot
So
of people
let's
really know about?
Yeah. So let's look at it from diagnostic. And again, some things you'll see more overtly and other things are behind the scene, making medicine more efficient for people. But let's talk about, say, diagnostics. They are AI powered tools for companies like, say, Viz AI or Zebra Medical or Analytic, which help with the image reconstruction and diagnostics. Essentially, what it's doing is helping the clinicians with getting better access to better reconstruction of this so they can pinpoint and make better diagnoses per se. So that's one. There are also other things where you're having more AI based, what's called like ambient learning, right? You may find that when you're having a conversation with your doctor per se, there's AI powered voice recognition listening going on. And it is helping, it's documenting this and it's supplementing the conversation as well. So that is something else. Again, some of these things you may see more overtly and others are behind the scenes. But then there's other things, for example, seeing SaaS, software as a service, and sensors and AI all coming together to address some of these healthcare issues. For example, a great example is a personal EKG monitoring device. Some say companies like AliveCo or FibroCheck, they have software which can help detect some of the most common arrhythmia types and help monitor patients from home. The patients can review the data remotely, reducing the need for office visits.
And what would you recommend or say for someone like myself who's a fundamentalist? We talked about this in the first call, our first interaction, and that was around, I've always found I could definitely benefit from more data. I've definitely used AI for various things when it comes to just talking through issues. It's nice because there's no judgment that's coming from that AI versus and in our minds and in many people's minds, they don't feel comfortable even talking to a counselor in that way. When it comes to fitness and health, the foundation I've always found is less is more. Doing fasting, here's some black coffee until I eat and get my exercise in and make sure I'm eating really good foods. Are there ways that I could expand my mindset that other people could be aware of as well, who are gonna fall into that bucket?
Not sure I understand that question. If you could just.
Let's because if you really look at health,
Mhm.
much of it breaks down to these fundamental components of eating right, moving, fasting here and there, exposing your body to some stress. And oftentimes as technologists, I'm a technologist. You're greatly experienced in technology, and we know the wonderful benefits that it can improve, but it's not always the solution, at least to people who look at health the way I look at health in time. So are there ways should I be more aware of the advantages that using some data collection and data analysis methods could benefit my life? One of which might be even, let's say, health testing. You get your blood testing done. Even a very healthy person can go get their blood testing done, find out different things. So for someone who's going to fall into a bucket like me, what are the things that you would recommend or the things that you see that we could improve it?
What we're going to see going forward also with AI, it's going to be able to analyze the genetic, because we all have genes and different genes with different predispositions. And so it'll be able to analyze the genetic, the lifestyle, and the environmental data, and to be able to provide some guidance, whether that guidance is for healthier living, or God forbid, if there are issues like people have more significant health issues which come up, it can help with more personalized treatment there per se.
So understanding the upside there, because really the nature of the question is what your enlightenment on the things that we don't know. Because a lot of times, if you want to improve yourself in some way, you don't know what you don't know. And you need to be exposed to that type of information to know what's out there on the horizon and know how you could be better, even problem aware versus solution aware, in essence.
And I think the value of AI is to really look at it is it allows you to look at very large data sets and look at it in terms of pattern recognition in there, right? So it's being able to do that for you. And it's also doing it via benchmarks. Now, this isn't necessarily new. We were doing some of this ourselves on our own as well. It's just allowing you to do it at a different scale as such, right? And as we move more towards quantum computing, when that becomes part of healthcare as well, you'll see that even much faster analysis as such and being able to deal with that. So
Mhm.
these are all just increments in hopefully the right direction for each individual as such.
You're a practitioner as well as being well versed in really the subject matter. What are some of the case examples that you've seen where this technology has driven the biggest changes over in an organization or in a subset of people?
I'll give you an example of a company I work with, right? It's called ASAP, was a startup which has since been acquired, funded by Optum Ventures and now part of Optum. But the whole premise on that was to figure out what a person's issue was and to match them to the right doctor as soon as possible. Because there's no point having a perfect doctor like 9 months later after we had your problem come out. So it's that matching aspect of it, which has become a real plus, not just on a purely B2C perspective, but as part of even the different hospital systems that they're working with to essentially allow for that matching and to have a much better patient experience as such and better outcomes.
And being completely immersed in this space, what percent of adoption or innovation do you believe that we're at so far when it comes to artificial intelligence driving value within healthcare?
Maybe not as early as 3 years ago. We made some progress, but we had a long way to go. And I think part of it is also looking at it as fact there are still some issues as well. There's a lot of benefits around it, but there's some issues as well that you need to be aware of and address. So first and foremost, in medicine, I think what's very important is to make sure that we are dealing with the right data sets. They're representative of the issue that you're looking at. They're the right from that perspective. There are no biases in there. And also from point of view, you're making sure they have been protected from a data breach, cybersecurity. So they haven't been manipulated in it. So they're good data sets to work off as such. Just the aware of that is a big deal. Second thing is, as people are looking to implement this as well, they have to be conscious about what are what from different people that are using it, what are they thinking of? Like, how would they use it and making sure that's reflected in there as well.
What are some of the most exciting problems that you have yet to see solved in healthcare?
think, I don't know if it's exciting per se, but the healthcare access for all is still a big issue. We see a big disparity in that access. So anything which can help on that is a big deal. And if you look at it from a population health perspective, I think it's very exciting that AI is able to analyze so much of the data at scale, and someone can figure out how to put the right resources towards it and help address those problems.
And maybe a greater adoption in that, because it also connects to one other thread that you mentioned, when you, because you brought up access earlier, is being able to divide and get to a level of AI where we can divide the tasks that can be done but with AI and have those done with AI, and the others that are really human driven and require that human touch. That's probably a pathway to that level of access that would make a greater impact. And I say exciting in the sense of the scale of impact that would have on the largest number of people.
And I think I am very much in the camp of looking at AI as not replacing the clinicians per se, but really helping them. It's assisting them in different ways, in some way. And I think we all hear and read about these stories where there is definitely physician burnout in terms of all that they're supposed to do. And so if we can clear up some of the things for them from an admin perspective, can open up some time there for them. If we can make the diagnosis earlier, give them some access to information suggestions as to what might be the cause of the situation as such, they would still need to make the decision, look at the different inputs as such and make a decision on it. Or I think I look at it very much as a helper rather than a replacement or
Mhm.
machines.
Do you spend much time on X.com at all, or really just browsing the general new technologies that come out in terms of robotics and AI?
Yeah, I am more of a follower on X.
Yeah.
We are putting stuff out, and I actually do that for a number of different positions or healthcare things. Like for example, and this is not just digital health, but someone who I respect a lot, a person called Eric Topol, Dr. Eric Topol, and I learn a lot from the different things that he puts out as to what's going on in terms of different aspects of us.
I bring that up because I saw yesterday there was a robot that was trained to cook at a Michelin star level.
Nice.
And that's probably a field where the fine motor skills that are required to do that are pretty intense, pretty significant. And I had a doctor on my podcast a few weeks ago. And if we're looking at the shortage and the burnout in nursing or doctors that are coming up, we could see robotics being used, or robots being used, to perhaps bridge some of those gaps. That's a critical need that's very hard to solve, especially when we look at the context of our population, reproduction, and the rates that are associated there.
Yeah, and again, just talking to different people, whether it is things from point of view of helping some of the seniors in nursing homes as such, because there is a very real shortage of health aid as such. That's one. And I think this other thing was I actually saw that maybe online or on TV, but to your point about the cooking on a Michelin star rated level, that this was actually putting together some very complex chemo drugs
Oh, wow.
needs as well. So I just think there are ways, and again, I look at it as some of the more routine things that robots can do, then it leaves room for doing something else. And there's certainly think robots and surgeries, that's pretty common now for a while.
Most definitely. So it's just expansion of that level. And it's not even an expansion of trust, because for a robot to do a surgery versus a robot to do a manual labor task when it comes to helping somebody with their IV, maybe there's some sensitivities there, or really just general bed health when it comes to long term health in hospitals. Let's look at the roadblocks, or there's a term I'm looking for here, bottlenecks. There it is. What are the bottlenecks to the adoption, further adoption and utilization of AI in healthcare?
A lot of it has to do with trust. When you started reading about it, are people comfortable with it? We have seen, for example, they may say you all have these visions of maybe seeing too many of the sci-fi movies and having robots run amok or something like that. So you want to make sure that there are some level of controls in there as well. What are they working off? If it is patient data and as such and other things, how well it is it's protected us. There are all these different things which come into play as well.
Mainly trust, or are there other elements? Do you see there's enough funding going into these spaces, enough talent going into these spaces, or what are there any other bottlenecks when it comes to this coming to fruition and having the biggest impact?
I think, like I mentioned before, the making sure that you have the right data sets to
Mhm.
work with is crucial. Whether you are treating a particular disease and making sure that you have good representation of the demographics of essentially people with different profiles represented in there as well. That is key because your AI algorithm is going to work off that data set. But if that data set isn't right, then you may be getting very wrong answers. And that could have an adverse impact on the patient treatment and outcomes.
I'm recalling something that somebody said because the old UHG building headquarters is actually right across from where my office is here, right out my window. I believe they've relocated since. But he was in part of their internal innovation department. And I don't remember the exact quote, but he was a little staggered at the way that they viewed their appetite for innovation when it came to trying new things. It was very different, and he thought it was too passive in many ways. Do you think that's potentially a barrier as well, or have we seen that appetite shift over the years as technology continues to accelerate?
I think we are definitely seeing that appetite shift.
Good to hear.
What do you think?
I don't know enough about healthcare in particular, how the internals really work of healthcare. I would just think I would say that you look at the Stanfords of the world and a lot of young students who are coming up and creating new products, they are in some of the spaces, and some of the ripest opportunity that we're seeing that's provable value is in things like diagnosis, reading X-rays or radiographers and things like that, and being able to really determine the nature of an issue and the severity of an issue. So I think there's value there. I guess if I look at I couldn't speak to the funding ecosystem, that'd be more your purview. But again, I'd say it would seem to me that a lot of the challenges are likely gonna be around that comfort level, as you're talking about, just people feeling like they want a robot to take care of them versus a human.
And sometimes, and again, maybe I am talking, and maybe I think it's true in other urban areas as well. But in the Boston area, for example, the wait times to see physicians, primary care but specialists can be horrendous. It can be months. It can be 8 or 9 months. So people may be willing to have some level, some treatment earlier on in terms of being able to talk through things and see what can be done. And again, you have to feel comfortable. You have to see what kind of results people are getting, and you want to make sure there's some kind of human supervision as well. It's not purely this thing, but I think there's going to be an appetite for addressing that as well. And it's interesting. I just wanted to mention something when you're talking about funding. 30% of in 2024, 30% of the healthcare funding went to AI focused startups.
Mm,
And again, we have to keep in mind AI within healthcare is very broad, as I alluded to earlier. Some of it is more patient facing, some of it is in the back end from an efficiency perspective. But nevertheless, I think it was an interesting stat.
mhm. And actually can add one thing, and it semi contradicts I would when it full doesn't fully contradict the thought or the perspective I had on the fundamentals of health, but I did recently get very sick. This was actually the beginning of February. I had no idea what it was. I think it was that RSV or pneumonia is what ChatGPT actually diagnosed me to have. I just felt much more comfortable, similar to that AI counselor thing. I just felt much more comfortable sitting on ChatGPT as I'm bedridden with 103 fever, asking and self-diagnosing what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, and the confidence in that analysis was sufficient enough for me to say, "Okay, this is probably what I should do about it." And I don't know if you heard that stat, but that's I think it was about 90 to 95% accuracy. It compare so ChatGPT's accuracy versus a doctor. So the doctor is still accurate, much more accurate by 10%, but 90 to 95% is probably good enough in most cases. Obviously, more sticky situations or delicate health situations, definitely go to a doctor. But there's a level of trust there and access. The access was so simple. I'm already paying the $20 a month. Might as well see.
Yeah, and I think it's something which is gonna that trust or that comfort level is gonna grow over time as the technology gets better, as the data sets get better, and the what you're hearing like there's something to hook to the self-diagnosis or whatever. As the information gets better, that people's comfort level will grow as well, and usage.
And hopefully it can really be viewed as a solution because maybe that's one of the biggest barriers is just people not wanting to be replaced in any industry. People don't want to be replaced. They always want to still be involved. But at the same time, they're experiencing that burnout. They're overwhelmed, especially as we saw with COVID. The demands were higher than ever, and their ability to service did not immediately grow overnight. They still had the same capacity, but they had to respond to a bigger challenge.
So clinicians or physicians, they want to, the healthcare providers want to spend time with patients and interacting with them directly. So when they are caught up with all the admin stuff in terms of the notes, the electronic health records and things. That becomes a challenge. Just keep up with that. So if there's a way to automate that so they can, because you know what? There are things, in your case, it could be addressed via ChatGPT. Other things, physicians do need to examine you and they may be able to discern something. Hey, looks that it could be a fluke, but it really is something else or whatever. I'm just giving an example.
For sure.
But I think so to be able to do that and then not be distracted with other things. Most of them are wonderful and get burnt out in the process in terms of trying to do both. But anything
Mhm.
we can do on that and it would be a big help.
Would ambient listening be a solution to that, as you're saying? So you're having the conversation. Were you saying that it could actually interpret potential illness based on the voice and the pitch and the tone? Is that kind of what you were mentioning by the ambient listening? So it's going to
Yes.
overview with the
What's
doctor or
funny is it's documenting, first of all, it's doing right now more basic admin stuff like generating billing and diagnostic codes, ordering lab tests, scheduling follow-up visits. But that said, we are looking into things like their tools, for example, up to date, which are using AI to help clinicians find evidence-based answers and stuff. So there's both things going on, some on the admin end, but also to help the clinicians with some tools which can help them even within diagnosis, not just in terms of imaging, but in other ways.
Mm. And this is not necessarily AI related, but it is advanced health. I read yesterday that it was actually from the All In podcast that IVF will become so advanced. I don't know, they didn't really give a timeline, but that essentially you could take skin cells and turn that into a viable embryo, which so then a mother could basically give birth at any point.
Very cool. There are lots of couples, and it's very tough going through fertility challenges
Mhm.
for couples and families as such. So I think when we are doing this research and seeing what comes out of it or solves those problems, I think that's a plus. Yeah. I think this is very early.
Most definitely. I would like to talk about because you mentioned that one of the key barriers in your mind, first and foremost, or it was the second, was the access to the data sets. So what can startups do when it comes to that very sticky situation? Because it's perhaps the existence of the data set to solve in sufficient quantities to solve that problem in a unique or novel and delta effective way. But the other is also the regulatory concerns, the data privacy concerns. So as startups that are looking to or founders who are looking to innovate in this ecosystem, what are some of the things that they can do or should know when it comes to getting access to those data sets?
Two things. Like, absolutely need to be cognizant of the regulations in place to for data privacy and others. That's no getting around it. Just need to make sure that both from a data privacy perspective and data protection from having robust cybersecurity measures, that's really important. I think the other thing which can help is strategic partnerships with healthcare providers, with hospital systems, or even the healthcare associations as such, whether it is something related to, say, cardiac, American Heart Association, or if someone's addressing something on the from a different cancer wise or whatever. Be able to connect with all these different access different resources through these strategic partnerships becomes a big plus.
And I think this is a point of note because I've recently started this finance industry focused consulting firm last year. And I think a good point of note for founders is that sometimes these regulated industries seem scarier, they're harder to get into. But once you get in them, if you have a very strong solution, your adoption can come very quickly. If you've proven it out at one healthcare system, that's a lot of different adoption points given the number of hospitals and the number of patients that they may have, depending on your model. But then once it's proven there, it can expand to the next one much more quickly.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is a little bit of patience on part of the entrepreneurs in this space
Mhm.
because one, it is a long sales cycle. It takes a while to demonstrate value as such. But once you do, as you said, it moves much faster. And it's all right to start small with smaller groups or health practices or whatever it is, and then expand to the others. And then, of course, if you have the strategic partnership built in early, that becomes a big plus too.
And one of those barriers exists because I had a friend who he was a chiropractor. He had his exercise medicine degree and PhD and whatnot. And he invented different technologies and health products. And if you want to go market those health products, you can't reach those emails. It's really hard to reach those emails. Same with finance, because they're regulated industries, because they have to protect the data like you're talking about, and by the way, they're pinched on so much time. They don't have time to go pull up your cold email talking about your new health product. They have to focus those emails specifically on, here's my patient, here's a situation, or the data that's coming in about a patient.
So, what does help for people though, for looking to have these conversations with the right people is attend industry conferences and events because it's a more select audience of people who are interested in that. That becomes a big plus. And the other thing is, you talked about emails. Doctors' offices still have faxes.
Oh, goodness.
Right?
That's an insight right
Oh,
there. I
that's
didn't
just
think of,
yeah.
oh, wow.
But that said, I'm just saying that kiddingly, they do have faxes, but instead of going cold, you really want to build those relationships. And I think attending those conferences or events, whether it's in your local cities itself or otherwise, it becomes very
That's a golden insight, by the way, because someone my age does not. I'm never thinking about a fax machine. I had to actually send a fax to the IRS I was requesting a document, and so I needed to receive a fax, and I had to go. I pulled up a software to go do it. I said, "There's got to be a software for this," and thankfully there was. So definitely golden insight there. But yes, getting in person and getting engaged with people who are in the industry is key. What are some of the success stories that you've seen when it comes to startups in the healthcare space and their approach to product design, access of data, and distribution?
first and foremost, it is understanding that market. That's true of any startup in any industry. But when it comes to healthcare market, there's so many different stakeholders in there, right? It's like understanding the patient needs, what the patient truly wants, what the clinician wants, what the health system wants, right? And what the payer wants. Everybody has a different set of needs and priorities. So really understanding that. And part of it is also saying who will pay. You can have a really good technology and stuff. Is it from a reimbursement code? How's it going to fit in there as well? So that understanding of that ecosystem is one. The second thing is as they're designing these solutions, pick a problem. Again, similar to other industries, but it's like pick the biggest problem where your solutions will have the most impact in terms of patient outcomes and reducing costs or both as such. But when you're doing things incrementally, it's harder. If you can make it a must have versus nice to have, that's always a big plus, right? And then in terms of the solutions themselves, if they can be more intuitive and easy for people to use, but also fit in with the way their workflow is, right? Change is hard for people. So if you're asking people to change, even if your solution is very elegant and have this thing a lot of good outcomes out of it projected, if you have to make a lot of major changes, it's just really hard for people to implement it. So keeping that in mind, the regulations we talked about, healthcare does have regulations for good reason and making sure that products meet all those regulations and necessary standards, protecting that patient data while you do it, and the partnerships like I talked about, which could really help people get on that.
So I didn't think about that, the point you mentioned. So when it comes to the radiography or diagnosis of those types of illnesses that are related to that, does the insurance pay for that? Or is it the healthcare system? And let's say one of those products comes to market, who ends up paying for that? Is it does the
It depends
insurance?
what the product is,
Okay.
especially. Yeah.
And then what are some examples of a product that would be paid for by the healthcare system or one that would be reimbursed by insurance when it comes to digital health?
Yeah. So the aspect of when I was talking about, again, digital health is broad or whatever, but like, for example, if you're talking about something and to help with, say, patient scheduling or scheduling for the different operations and stuff, that's by the health system as such, right? They're improving things from an overall point of view. But then if it is from I'm just thinking back to even it was a reimbursement code set up for when people are from a mental health point of view in terms of how they're getting that assistance. It's not just being able to say if it is chronic conditions, if people are facing from chronic conditions perspective, finding ways to help them address that becomes it became reimbursable.
So operations versus point of care is a generalization, but in some sense could help a startup understand who they're going to sell to, who's going to pay for it.
Yeah, but every time there is no one size fits all. You need to go have that conversation, maybe with a few different health systems as to see how they are approaching it. They may be looking at it as, hey, this is how we're doing the diagnosis and stuff like that. But if we can incorporate some of the technology in there, it saves us time in terms of our physicians doing their stuff with some piece which is done already, or improves the accuracy, which is overall cost later, because more and more you're also seeing people being reimbursed on a value care basis as well.
Mhm. And tell us a little bit more about that value care basis.
And again, from there, from a value care basis as such, that is, people are, you want to keep your patients healthier, right? That's the basic premise. And you're looking at it from an overall health point of view and not necessarily per procedure, per this thing. So a lot of the preventative stuff that you're thinking of comes into play there.
So stem cells, is that a preventative?
I don't think so.
Gotcha. Okay. And then let's talk about a vision for the next 5 to 10 years that you have.
So I think we're certainly going to start seeing AI being more and more incorporated in a way. And also, as we improve things, we improve data sets, we improve these diagnostic capabilities, we improve the precision medicine aspect of it, you're going to start to see better outcomes coming out of it. And then certainly the operational efficiencies that we talked about. You'll see more on the wearable stuff. You'll see more of the remote monitoring going on, especially with chronic conditions, and making sure that you can deal with acute instances very quickly as such, and deal with that. So I think from a number of things like that, you will continue to see a lot more progress. Also, there was this whole piece around, I didn't touch on this earlier, in terms of drug discovery, different aspect of healthcare. But here's where AI can again sift through very large data sets to identify the most promising candidates, and perhaps also talking about the efficacy and also potential side effects. So if something is going to be a no-go, you need to know about it sooner rather than later. It also helps in the amount of cost put into that drug versus another approach as such, which may be more of a winning approach. And I look at it from a point of view of, hey, if you can have the best drugs come out to the market fastest, you can improve the odds for success, not only for the pharma company developing it, but most importantly for the patients and outcomes.
Mhm. And that's when it comes to drug discovery. And it seems like that application more than others will massively benefit from the quantum computing that you mentioned.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what about blockchain? Where do you see that coming into play? Has it seen adoption much in healthcare yet? Or
Somewhat. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's been adoption at scale as such, but the few different applications I've seen there are for things like the safety of patient records. It can also help with perhaps those couple of things come to mind right away.
and you're out in Boston, which, if I remember correctly, is somewhere between 60 and 80% of healthcare funding starts in Boston in terms of the United States. Is that accurate?
I don't have that number. I do know that we do get a fair amount of funding here, not just in terms of the large university system in the area there. There's a lot of research going on there, but in also with their partners, the healthcare systems, for example, the Mass General system right here.
Mhm. And you're with Maroon Venture Partners, which invests out of UMass. Uh, Talk about how, let's say, executives could set up a structure that would incentivize and create innovation like what you have established and you all have established there.
A little bit of clarification. There's the Maroon Fund is not part of UMass Amherst. It was just set up to essentially support the UMass Amherst ecosystem in terms of entrepreneurship. But this is one day to address it for like when you're talking about for executives. As I think first and foremost, having a culture of promoting these new ideas as such, ways to address things for their customers or for internally within the organization, I think, but just that openness to new ideas is very important doing that up front. I have seen companies do that where they would have hackathons. They would have organized hackathons, not only from an external perspective, but to see how they can come up with ideas to solve a customer problem or something that they're facing internally. And it ended up becoming a big plus because it also helps the more of the team building within the company as such, as teams come together addressing these different problems. Some of their good ideas take on a life and get funding within the company and like little teams addressing that. And so that becomes a big plus. But I think being open in a corporate setting, they're talking about funding coming that way, not necessarily from a VC points. Those are thought inputs.
And so what are the differentiators in some of the companies that have been very successful coming out of there and the traits associated?
Yeah. So I think what's important from looking at it from a venture perspective, and I've also been or just angel investor, been involved with other companies. It's back to that basic, that deep understanding of the market, right? The market needs the competition, whether it is direct or indirect, right? What are the big problems that they're facing? And because your company, you need to look at it, that's something they're willing to pay for to have that addressed and have that addressed now. And then it's in terms of if the other solutions that they've had, it didn't necessarily work for them. If things are working just fine, everything is great, is that the best market for you to get into with a new venture as such? Probably not, right? But if it is something, it is an unmet need, it is not being worked on. Getting that understanding and say, okay, I think I can come up, I can solve that. I either have a technology which I can morph into addressing this particular problem or come up with something to address it is that becomes key, understanding that. The other thing is looking at it on point of view, how are you going to address it in terms of having a strong team to address that, right? When I say a strong team, it can be diverse skills, diverse perspectives, but also importantly, you can have diversity there of ideas and skills, but you do need to have a common shared vision. If they're in sync in terms of what you're trying to do as a company, that vision and those values, that becomes very important to put that all together. And then something I'm not sure how to quite say it, but really that can do attitude, right? That we're going to make this work. We're going to make this happen.
Is there any notable investments that come to mind that
So for us at Maroon, it's because we have some which are not necessarily in an exit stage, but they have grown very well. And not everything is health related because it is, we fund pretty much anything you would see coming out of a university, except for drug discovery, which takes so much money that what we would put in as an early stage fund would not necessarily work as such. But certainly on the healthcare side, company that I've been involved with, had a board role there, is its own practice, which is around health and wellness, platform for health and wellness. Another one, which is very interestingly, healthy eating, a company called 88 Acres, which has more nut-based food products and doing very well there as well. There are others in terms of, again, different aspect of health, dealing with PFAS, which unfortunately we're seeing more and more of. And
what is PFAS?
in terms of you see that in your water and stuff with these
Yes, the microplastics?
yeah microplastics and other things as well. So you're
Okay.
really looking at see how you can extract and essentially deal with them and destroy them, and so it doesn't impact people's health. It's addressing health in a few different ways.
In summation, there's so much opportunity in healthcare when it comes to applying leading edge technologies. We have extreme rates still of obesity and complications and the health issues and all things that cascade down from our way of living that entrepreneurs should be excited about and look forward to solving using various methods. What about the importance of the right network? How does a founder go about building the right network? You mentioned the industry conferences, but what other successful elements of a mindset or an approach have you found that have led to the best results in the companies that you've backed?
I think it's important to understand upfront, what do you want to get out of that network, right? And are you looking for people to help you get with that customer? Is it from a technology perspective? With understanding that first, then you can figure out where do I want to go to find those kind of people. The other thing is in person is great, but I would not underestimate the power of LinkedIn. It does work. And sometimes, especially as one gets very busy, it allows you to do some things. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but it allows you to keep that communication going in where you are with your company as well at scale. So it's a combination of both.
Keeping the communication consistent. And what about thought leadership? Is that essential to the success of these digital health startups?
I think it is for every company, every entrepreneur to be able to do that. I think the question just becomes how do you fit it in and how do you do it at scale as well, right? For example, if someone was in here in participating in your podcast, and being able to talk about what their vision is in terms of, say, a traditional health entrepreneur, talking about their vision and why them, and how can they help address it. That becomes a big plus.
So being able to and having a very clear vision comes and cascades down from the deep understanding of the market,
Yeah.
but having and communicating that very clear vision is key for the success of these companies.
But that said, I will absolutely say with startups, things change. First of all, because the environment changes as well. Nothing is static, right? So part of the thing is for startups who are very successful is being in tune with what's happening in the external market, being able to synthesize that and say, hey, does that mean we stay the course, we tweak it a little bit, or we pivot? And it doesn't mean that you're abandoning something, but you just have to be receptive to it could be what's happening in the market. It could also be when you're in the early stages as you are out talking to people, whether patients or providers or whatever, and you're hearing that this is great, but we're not ready for it yet. And you may just say, you know what? That's okay. Let me park that application or that idea and focus on something else. That's all right. That's perfectly okay to do that.
So a way to rephrase that would be vision as thesis.
And it also depends on the stage of the startup. When you're very early on, that product market fit is so very essential. Where you are, uh, you could have a great technology and product out of it, but just making sure that the market is ready for it from a time perspective now. Because one of the toughest thing is when you're a young startup with limited funds, if you're out there evangelizing, that's really tough. And if you're doing evangelizing all on your own without a strategic partner with a lot more resources, it makes it very difficult.
And you mentioned strategic partnerships. If you could get some light on that of examples, because I've definitely experienced the value of partnerships. So it's something that not everybody utilizes, but can definitely be very powerful. So what are some of the examples of very good strategic partnerships which were forged that helped a young startup achieve the success in their journey?
So I'll give you an example of it wasn't necessarily a young startup, but it was a company where they had digital medical education using digital means for different therapeutic areas. And the partnerships in there with the for this chronic condition or the different associations, whether it was the American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, something for neurology or whatever, was a big plus. And here in the Boston area, there's also not only the American Diabetes Association, they also have the partnership with the Joslin Diabetes Center, right? So being able to partner and get access to the latest in terms of research and thinking and the clinicians who are their thing along those lines was a big plus for them as well. So I think, and there's another young company that I've been involved with called Moving Analytics, which helps with people being able to address cardiac rehab remotely as well, or in a hybrid setting. So, because one of the biggest challenges people who need cardiac rehab don't go there, don't complete the whole thing, and their health suffers as a result of it. So what they did was they absolutely partnered with the American Health Association in terms of getting feedback to them, getting access to them, also with Kaiser Permanente, which was a really big deal. And with Stanford, there was some stuff coming out of there. So they were able to take that and build a really good company, which is making a big difference in people's lives in there. So yeah, that becomes a big plus.
And out of all the insights that you provided today, what is one action that you would suggest to founders that are listening to this?
I think I would say there are a lot of big challenges in healthcare as well. So think big in terms of create these impactful solutions that not only reduce costs, but also improve patient outcomes, tackling inefficiencies and making a real difference in people's lives.
Yeah. Fantastic. Amita, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the show. Thank you for all the insights you provided. For those that are looking to get in contact with you, we'll drop some links down below. But what's your preferred method? Should they reach out via your firm, Altech Consulting, or LinkedIn?
LinkedIn works best.
Fantastic. We'll include that link. Amita, again, pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Bye.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching this episode of Titans Up today. What did you learn from it? Make sure to drop a comment below with your most valuable insight so that other people can engage in the conversation around what this speaker brought to the table. And then on another front, make sure to subscribe so that every time we drop a new episode, you will be notified. And that way you can keep fueling your dreams and your brain with fresh insights, which can help you along your journey and along your path to your goals. So thank you so much again. And I look forward to seeing you in the next interview.